Well, hey y'all again, and welcome back to another reaction video. I'm your host with the most, Natalie Love. If you haven't already known, because I'm sure you had already watched the other reaction video, so you know my name. But what's crazy is you didn't subscribe. Do I still have this wig sitting on top of my head? You goddamn right. That's just where it's at now. Anyway. Make sure you go ahead and like, comment, and subscribe if you have not already noticed, which you should. Advisory, I do curse, I cusses. I have a foul, filthy fucking mouth. But I'm going to ensure that you're going to have a good time here now. Some of y'all have been asking me, and I managed to find a video of Mr. Ballin's dad. He hasn't copywritten. So with that being said, because Mr. Ballin don't play by his coin, neither do I play by mine, sweetheart. Okay, don't nobody want to sit here for free, okay? But anyway, yeah, this is a video of his called This Frat Boy Did the Unthinkable for mature audiences only. My page is for mature audiences, so if you made it here by mistake, get your ass out of here. Get your young ass out of here and go to sleep. Wash your feet first, okay? But other than that, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Welcome to the channel. Turn your bell notifications on so you'll get a notification, get a ding ding or whatever. I don't know how they work that out, but every time I post a video, y'all will see it. Okay, so again, this is from Mr. Ballin. I will put the original link down below. We are recording, and let's go. Oh, okay, I have no
story is considered to be one of the most disturbing of all time. But before we get into today's story, if you're a fan of the strange, dark, and mysterious delivered in story format, then you come to the right place because that's all we do, and we upload 2 or 3 times every week. So if that's of interest to you, please invite the like button to come to the zoo with you, and then once you get there, accidentally spill honey all over them, and then push them into the bear enclosure. Also, please subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you don't miss any of our weekly uploads. All right, let's get into today's story.
I love Mr. Ballin. I hope it's not too loud. I fix it if needed.
Austin Harroff was born on December 21st, 1996, to a dentist and a pharmacist. They lived in a beautiful home in Palm Beach County, Florida, which is not only one of the nicest and wealthiest places to live in Florida, but it is one of the nicest and wealthiest places to live in all of America. And that's why, as of 2021, there are 44 billionaires that call this paradise their home. In 2010, when Austin was 13 years old, his parents suddenly got divorced, and within the same calendar year, both of
y'all hold on, Mike coming home and Princess tripping. One moment. We are back.
his parents had new girlfriends and boyfriends. Now, of course, this was a shock to Austin and to his 1 year younger sister Haley, but they both relatively quickly adjusted to their new normal. And that was in large part because the kids didn't move out. They stayed in the family home with their mom, and their father, he did move out, but he moved into a home that was very close by. About a year after the divorce, Austin began high school, and immediately he excelled. He was placed into all advanced classes, and within these advanced classes, Austin was consistently at the top of his class. Austin was also a big athletic guy. He was about 6 feet tall and weighed about 200 pounds, and so naturally he played football for all 4 years he was in high school.
I feel like this video finna get real fucked up just because he had like the cookie cutter life. I think it's finna go bad.
And for 1 year, his sophomore year, he also wrestled. But despite his size and willingness to play these very rough physical sports, Austin was not an aggressive guy. In fact, his football coaches actually used to criticize him for not being aggressive enough. And on game days, they would try to make him mad in hopes that would inspire him to go out there and smash some people. But it really didn't work because Austin was Austin.
He just wasn't that type of
guy
dude
who was actually much more interested in helping people than smashing them. In fact, towards the end of high school, Austin became obsessed with trying to identify a career that would allow him to help the most people. And he was so passionate about this that when he spoke about it, a huge smile would kind of involuntarily appear on his face. And so because of this, and because of Austin's generally happy disposition, his father very lovingly began referring to him as the happy boy. Shortly before Austin's graduation in 2015, he received a letter in the mail from Florida State University, and it was informing him he had been accepted into their 4-year pre-med pre-med program. Austin had settled on medicine as being his intended career path to help the most people, and so being accepted into this very prestigious program was like a best case scenario. And so Austin and his family were elated, and that summer that followed his high school graduation was totally charmed. Austin was on cloud nine. He spent a lot of time with his family and his friends, and then finally at the end of the summer, his family packed all of his stuff into the car and they drove 6 hours north to Tallahassee, where the Florida State campus was. They helped move him into his dorm, and then afterwards they gave him a big hug, said good luck, and they left. And I'm sure on their ride back, the family members thought to themselves, Austin is doing so great. He is not only ready for college, he is ready to be an adult. He's ready to live on his own and be responsible. And at the end of Austin's first year in college, that supposition about him ready to be an adult seemed to be accurate. Austin got excellent grades, he met a nice girlfriend, and even though he wasn't playing organized sports like football, he had found another athletic outlet in bodybuilding, and he had actually built a decent-sized social media presence around bodybuilding and fitness. But underneath all of this public success Austin was having that year, he was actually struggling a lot of the time. He just wasn't telling anyone. In a journal he kept, he documented a deep sense of inadequacy caused primarily from his sense that his peers didn't accept him. And so he would write endlessly about how if he could just stop being so shy and be more assertive and outgoing, that more people would embrace him and would like him and would accept him. Over the course of that year, Austin also started abusing different substances. Those included things like alcohol, marijuana, and Vyvanse. Vyvanse is a drug that is a stimulant, and it's used to treat people with attention deficit disorder. He also experimented with hallucinogenic drugs like acid and mushrooms, and he also tried MDMA, which is kind of like a cross between a stimulant and a hallucinogenic. And those are just the drugs that we are aware he was taking. It's entirely possible he was taking other drugs too. Regardless, Austin began oscillating between the high of whatever drug or combination of drugs he was on to the low of his...
Y'all seek help. It ain't a must that everybody like you. You may not need to hear it, but somebody may need to hear it. Seek help and fuck other people. Do what makes you happy. Because a lot of times, as happy as you think another motherfucker is, they probably not. A lot of people that'll tell you about a lot of the happiness and then say something about your shit, is sometimes it be a deflection. Yeah, seek help outside of other people all the time. That's sad.
Sober mind, which was totally saturated with anxious and depressive thoughts. Before the end of the school year, Austin was secretly poised for a full-blown mental breakdown, and it seemed like he knew it was coming too. In the last month before the end of school, his internet search history is filled with questions like, I think I'm crazy, what do I do? And how do you know if you're crazy? And how to deal with obsessive thoughts? And do I need to sleep? And what happens if you don't sleep? It was clear he was...
Don't ask Google or WebMD. You'll fuck around and have a splinter, and WebMD will tell you you got cancer, stage 4. Don't do it. Seek real help.
Starting to question his own sanity. When Austin finally returned back home from Florida State that summer, his family immediately noticed there was something wrong with Austin. Within a few days of being home, Austin had moved his bed from his bedroom down into the garage, claiming that the reason he did this was because the house was full of demons. At night, instead of sleeping, Austin would patrol the house. He would literally just walk all around the house all night, never stopping, and every 2 hours he would knock on the bedroom doors of his family members and loudly announce that he was guarding them from the demons in the house.
Absolutely the fuck not. It'd be hard enough for me to get to goddamn sleep because my mind be every which way and I be wanting to move around, get up, lay down. Unless I'm truly sleepy, don't you come knock on my goddamn door. If you gonna be crazy, you be crazy out here. Don't bring that shit to my goddamn door. Do not knock. I would have hit y'all, but I got y'all. Do not knock on my door.
Now, you can imagine how his family felt at the time. This was so unbelievably weird and totally out of character that they just didn't really know what to do. Even though it was obvious there was something wrong, they didn't jump into action. Instead, the only thing they did at first was to just start locking their bedroom doors at night to prevent Austin from coming inside during his nighttime patrols. But as the summer progressed and Austin continued to act totally weird with no explanation, his family began to become convinced that he must be on drugs, that is what would explain all of this totally strange behavior. And so when they confronted him about his drug use, he would admit that he was taking drugs. Lots of
yeah, I'm on crack, now what? And of course, Mike is taking a shower in the middle of my artistry, amen. So disregard the water that you're going to hear in the background. But, okay, so now he done told you he on drugs, now what?
different drugs, psychedelics, stimulants, you name it. He's taking all these drugs. And so naturally, his family latched on to his drug use as being the root cause of his very strange behavior. And so they focused their efforts almost exclusively on getting Austin clean again. But towards the end of the summer, Austin said he wasn't taking any drugs.
Oh my God, look at him. As big as he was.
But Austin was still acting totally crazy and unhinged.
He's not acting.
So around mid-August, the family decided they had to utilize something called the Baker Act. Under the Baker Act, individuals in Florida who are suspected of severe mental illness can be detained for up to 72 hours at the behest of their loved ones. And during these 72 hours, this individual is thoroughly assessed to see what's going on with them. And then at the end of those 72 hours, they are given a treatment plan that their family is supposed to help them enact. But before the family could utilize the Baker Act, something horrific happened. On the morning of August 5th,
did you know that after 180...
Now, normally watch the ads when they pop up on this channel. And if you decide to go to Mr. Ballin's channel, watch them there too. But here, we're not going to.
15th, one of Austin's very close friends, who he had known since second grade, said Austin just showed up at his house without calling ahead of time or letting him know, which was very uncharacteristic. And when this friend opened the door to see what Austin wanted, Austin just asked him, "What year was I born?" And so the friend says, 1996. And as soon as Austin heard this, he didn't give a reaction to it. He just turned around and he left. And so this longtime friend is looking at Austin walking away, wondering, like, what's going on with this guy? Is he high on drugs? Is he drunk? Like, what was that? So the friend goes back inside his house and he's thinking to himself, like, what should I do? And so after a couple of minutes, he decides, you know what, I got to call Austin and make sure he's okay. So he calls Austin, Austin picks up, and it's unclear what they talked about on the phone, but the friend convinced Austin to come back to his house and to just spend the day with him. But really, the friend just wanted to make sure Austin was okay. And so Austin comes back to the friend's house, and then the two of them actually would leave the house and meet up with some of their other friends that were in town that summer, as well as meet up with Austin's sister. And so the group, they decide they're going to go to the beach for the day. And on their walk to the beach, Austin tells the group that he just needs to get something at his house and that he will meet them down at the water. And so at this point, the group believes Austin is just fine. So they say, okay, yep, we'll meet you down there. And so Austin breaks off. He goes to his house. And when he goes back to the beach and meets up with his group of friends again, he's changed his outfit. He was now wearing this very thick, large football jersey. He was wearing long sweatpants that were also very thick. He had on 2 wristwatches and he had on sunglasses. And so as he walks down onto the beach, his friends look up at him, and it's super hot out, and they're at the beach. So this is a totally weird outfit to have on. And immediately they start kind of giving him crap about his strange...
Austin been telling y'all he was crazy. Not crazy, but on drugs. He been telling y'all his mind was altered. He told y'all that. He asked you what year was he born.
Outfit choice. But Austin did not think it was funny at all, and at first he was quiet, but then he...
See what I'm talking about now? The main person that wanted him to spend the day with him because he knew something was wrong from this man asking him what year was he born. Now you're making fun of his ensemble, knowing damn well his elevator is stopping at the neck. Everybody ain't your friend.
Kind of lashed out and said, if you tell me I'm crazy, I will kill you.
I
And
don't
at this,
think
his
he's
friends
joking.
did not give him any more crap. Everyone just said, okay, man, hey, didn't mean anything by it, just giving you a hard time, no big deal. But Austin's like clearly worked up, and so his sister comes over to him and she's like, hey, calm down, it's okay, it's not a big deal. And during this conversation, Austin suddenly goes back to being normal again, and he turns to his sister and he says, I'm actually half horse, and I'm immortal. And his sister's like, what? You really need to get professional help. You need to see a therapist or a psychologist or something.
Really? You think?
Something is wrong with you, and it's been wrong all summer. You need to get help. Now, apparently, Austin actually responded to this very positively. And he said, I agree. There is something going on, and I do need to get help. You're
now
right.
what?
And so after that, Austin and the rest of the group, they stayed at the beach for several hours. And then in the evening time, Austin, his sister, and Austin's very close friend, who was the guy that saw Austin in the morning when he asked, what year was I born, they all said they had to leave. And so the trio, they leave the beach and they head to Duffy's, which was a restaurant in town. And they were going there to meet up with Austin's father and his father's girlfriend. And so as they're getting to this restaurant, they're walking along the sidewalk, they're nearing this restaurant, when suddenly Austin turns to his sister and says, hey, I need to test out my immortality. And he just turns away from her, away from the sidewalk, towards traffic, and just starts walking into traffic, like he's gonna let a car hit him to test his immortality. And so his sister immediately was able to grab him and pulled him back onto the sidewalk, and then basically stood on the left side of him, preventing him from running out into traffic, and kind of pushed him along up the sidewalk right up to the front door of this restaurant. And when they got there, Austin had stopped trying to walk out into traffic. He was acting normal again. And it was there that the trio met up with Austin's father and his father's girlfriend, and the five of them went into Duffy's restaurant. It was about 7:45 p.m. when they got inside, and they were very quickly sat in the very back of the restaurant in this
He got a visor on. Yeah, he crazy.
booth. And so there was a CCTV camera that watched them while they were inside this building. And so they're sitting at this booth, and about 3 minutes after having sat down, Austin gets up and walks away from the booth and walks as if he's going towards the bathroom, but then stops, doesn't go to the bathroom, turns around and walks back towards the front of the building, and then walks out the front doors, just leaves the restaurant altogether.
Left.
Now, it's unclear if the rest of his family saw him do this. It doesn't seem like they did. But just a minute later, Austin comes back inside the restaurant and just walks right back to his table and sits down like nothing had ever happened. Less than 10 minutes later, Austin would get up again from his table, except this time, instead of feigning...
What kills me is y'all know he need help. Y'all are asking him to seek help. Why? This weird. Y'all are asking him to seek help on his own. Obviously, he's incapable of doing it. So, with that being said, like, we're not finna go get nothing to eat. And this is from the news. We're not finna go get nothing to eat. We're finna get you some fucking help.
Going to the bathroom, he just walks straight from his table right out the front doors of the restaurant
Again.
and disappears. A couple minutes later, Austin's mother, who was not at dinner with them, she was at her home, which happened to be nearby this restaurant. She was home when she heard the sound of someone coming into her house. And so she went around to see who it was, and she found her son, Austin, in her kitchen, drinking vegetable oil, and there was Parmesan cheese all over the counter that apparently he had been eating as well. And so she runs up to him and she grabs the vegetable oil and she puts it down and she tells him to stop, at which point Austin does stop. And then I guess Austin just went up to his room and he changed out of his clothes because perhaps he got oil all over his shirt. And then his mom just drove him back to the restaurant.
You just saw your son guzzling vegetable oil with Parmesan cheese, unless it is shredded, and still, Parmesan cheese is the driest goddamn cheese you could possibly eat. You are eating oil and Parmesan cheese. And you gonna take him back to the restaurant amongst other people. Like, sometimes people be crying out for help. This man done told y'all he on drugs. He done came out in a goddamn Falcons football sweat uniform in the middle of summer to the beach. Ask what year was he born. Y'all know he ain't all the way right, and he keeps getting up from this table.
she watched him get out of the car, and she watched him go through the front door, and then she drove off. And so about 30 minutes after he left that second time, Austin walks through the front doors of the restaurant. He's got a different shirt on, different hat on, and he just...
The quickest way to get fuller lips without injection.
So sick of everybody looking alike by the mouth.
walks to the back of the restaurant where his sister, his friend, and his father's girlfriend are, and he sits down like nothing had ever happened. At first, it looks like everyone at the table is just silent. But then Austin's father very clearly says something to Austin, and it seems kind of hostile. And it would turn out Austin's father, who loved his son, was just totally at a loss for what to do with him. And he said to Austin when he sat back down, "What is wrong with you?" And at this, Austin just stands up and presses his father's face back up against his seat, kind of pinning him there. And then at some point, he just lets go, he leaves the booth, and he walks right out of the restaurant for a third time. Austin's friend, who was eating with them, he got up and kind of chased after Austin, but he was about 30 seconds behind him, and so by the time he got outside, he didn't know where Austin went, and so he quickly came back in the restaurant. He told the rest of the group he didn't know where Austin was, and so at this point, Austin's...
Why is it at no point do y'all start thinking of the safety of other people? This baby just mushed his own daddy in public. He just mushed his own daddy in public. 9 times out of 10, the nigga finna pay for the meal. He mushed him in public.
Father's girlfriend would actually call the police and report Austin missing. They knew he was totally unhinged and they didn't know where he was going to go, if he was a threat to himself or someone else, and so they figured they should just tell the police and have the police go find him. About 4 miles away from this restaurant, 53-year-old Michelle Mishcon was sitting in her garage watching TV. Normally, she would be joined by her husband, 59-year-old John Stevens, but he was out walking their dog, so for the time being, Michelle was alone. The couple had been married for roughly 20 years. They had 3 kids together from previous marriages, and they were just totally in love with
I hate when they start saying had, because you already know
each other. That garage was like their happy place. That was basically like their living room. They loved having the door wide open so they could wave to neighbors and flag people down to have a drink with them or just chat with them. They were just known to be a very happy, loving couple that were fun to be around. And according to their kids, they had both recently retired. John retired from his landscaping company that he owned, and Michelle retired from her financial advisory job.
That's her mama.
And the two of them were apparently both just really excited about retirement life. They were excited to spend more time together and go out with them.
Imagine going through all the pressures of life to be sitting in the place that you are the happiest, just chilling, minding your goddamn business, and the devil just decides to be walking down your damn street. That's so unfortunate.
Friends and go out fishing on their boat with their dog.
That's so
and then
unfortunate.
also spend as much time as they could just lounging back
Because I can
in
see
their
where
garage.
this is going.
John and Michelle's neighbor across the street was a middle-aged man named Jeff Fisher. Jeff was fairly close with the couple. He would usually watch their dogs anytime they went away, and he would often go in their garage and have a drink.
I'm trying to figure out, though, how do Mr. Ballin be knowing all this? How do you know the entire story? I'm gonna mind my business because I don't want to know who he know, but that got lied.
Just kind of hang out with them. And so this particular night, he was over in
Mr. Ballin better than the old bitch in the window.
his house, and he was going to bed early. So he laid down in his bed, he's getting ready to go to sleep, when he hears some strange sounds coming from outside his window across the street, over near John and Michelle's property. And so Jeff sits up in his bed and kind of strains his ears to see what it was that he heard, and as he's trying to listen for some faint sound, he suddenly hears a blood-curdling scream, a woman's scream, coming from across the street. And so Jeff instantly leapt into action. He jumped out of his bed, he ran downstairs, and he ran out his front door, and he looked across the street, and he saw this unknown man, some young man that was slamming the car door of Michelle's car that was parked in her driveway, and he begins walking up the driveway, and at the top of the driveway, Jeff sees Michelle is standing in the garage, and she looks totally terrified, and she's facing this unknown young man. And of course, this unknown young man was Austin Harif. Now, Jeff had no idea what was actually going on. All he knew was he heard this scream, which was probably Michelle, and he's looking out there and he's seeing a situation that just doesn't look good. And so instinctively, he decided he would just run across the street and make sure Michelle was okay. And if he had to, he would confront this unknown man, Austin. So Jeff begins running across his property, trying to get across the street to Michelle. But before he could even get across the street, he's looking up and he can see this guy, Austin, has grabbed Michelle and thrown her on the ground. And now he's on top of her and he's beating her. And so Jeff runs onto the driveway, and as he's going right up the driveway between the two cars that were parked there, Austin leaps off of Michelle. He turns around and he looks at Jeff and he says, "You don't want a part of this." And now Jeff, he's a pretty big guy, and so he's looking at Austin and he knows that if he doesn't do anything, this guy is just going to continue pummeling poor Michelle, and he had no idea where John was. And so he ran up and kind of lunged at Austin, and as he did that, Austin swung and he hit Jeff right across the side of the head. But Jeff took the hit. He didn't fall down. He grabbed Austin by the collar and threw him as hard as he could to the ground. And Austin, he hit the pavement hard, face first. And so Jeff is looking at this guy, kind of thinking he's not going to get up. But as he's assessing the situation, watching Austin stand back up again, Jeff suddenly feels a blinding pain in his face, in the side of his head, in his neck, on his back. And he looks down and he sees blood all over his arms. It's everywhere. He's covered in blood. It would turn out Austin was carrying a knife. And so when he punched Jeff, that knife went into his face, it cut the side of his head, it cut his neck, and it cut his back. He had 5 different puncture points from that one swing. And so Jeff believed at the time this was a potentially fatal wound. He was worried perhaps his jugular had been struck and he was bleeding to death. And he's seeing Austin stand back up, coming right after him with this knife.
Good night.
And so Jeff decides their only chance is for him to run and call the police. And so he runs.
Huh?
She's not in it.
Oh, that's you.
Yeah, I had to get a tone.
Oh. Sorry, y'all. That's Mike.
He's into Michelle's property. He's thinking that he's kind of drawing this guy towards him away from Michelle. He runs into their property, he kind of slams into all their doors. He goes out a back door and then he loops around the property and then he makes a run for it straight across the street to his house. Never once did he turn around to see if this guy was after him. He figured he was right behind him. He gets to his house, he runs inside, he locks the door, and then he calls 911.
Please, a medical. Young man beating up a woman across the street.
Are either of them injured? Can you tell from where you are?
Yes, there's a girl laying on the ground. He beat her up. I ran over there. I'm bleeding profusely here at the moment.
Okay.
I don't know what happened.
Can you tell if she's conscious?
Bitch, I just said I'm profusely bleeding, and he beat her up. I just told you that I'm profusely bleeding, and he beat her up. What kind of aid do you expect me to be able to provide for anybody else? If I'm profusely bleeding and he beat her up, I done seen enough, bitch. I need y'all to get here. I think that's why I've always hated 911 operator jobs, just because I understand you trying to remain calm because that's your job. If you not calm, they not calm. But it's just like some of the questions that y'all trying to ask to fluff time is aggravating. I'm bleeding profusely at the moment. I'm gasping for air, attempting to call you to get aid for the lady across the street, whom of which I had to leave the fuck outside with the motherfucker that done stabbed me up because I'm profusely bleeding and she's beat up. Get here. Do that.
No, it does not appear so, no. I've been stabbed in the back. I'm bleeding pretty bad.
After the call is placed and Jeff is certain that help is on the way, he's barely conscious, but all he can remember thinking was, I hope this maniac, Austin, has abandoned his attack and just run off. Or, I hope John has come outside and he's helping his wife. But unfortunately, all Jeff could hear was the sound of Austin across the street making these loud, animalistic grunting sounds. And at the same time, he hears the sound of someone screaming at the top of their lungs. He doesn't even know if it's one person, if it's two people, if it's male, if it's female. All he hears is screams and grunting sounds. and then seconds later, the police show up. The following narrative is the account of the second responding officer, who we'll just call Dan, and the first responding officer we'll just call Kristen. And so Dan, he comes flying down the street, he's got his sirens on, and he pulls in right behind Kristen's cop car, which is parked right out in front of John and Michelle's property. Kristen is already running up the driveway, her gun is out, she's getting ready to engage somebody at the top of the driveway. And so Dan, he hops out of his car, he's got his hand on his gun, and as he turns to run up the driveway, his view is obscured. There are two cars parked in the driveway, and so he can't see what's at the top of the driveway that Kristen is apparently getting ready to draw her gun on. But as he begins running up the driveway, he sees there is this massive 6-foot wide stream of blood just coming down the driveway. And so he goes around the left side of the left car, he goes up and he sees Kristen right at the top of the driveway. She's got her gun aimed at the ground right in front of the car, so he can't see what's in front of the car yet. He comes bombing around the left side right behind Kristen, and he looks down at what she's aiming her gun at, and he sees there's this man lying on the ground, his eyes are open, he's just laying there kind of stiff, and he's looking up at Kristen, and he's looking up at Dan, and he's just quietly saying, "Please help me." The man on the ground was John Stevens, and on top of John Stevens was Austin. He was kind of laying sideways on John's chest. He had his left arm wrapped around John's neck to kind of hold him in place, and then he had his right arm and he was doing something to John's face. But Dan couldn't really tell what he was doing. All he could take in was there was clearly an aggressor and they needed to get him off of the victim. But Kristen could not take the shot because if she did, she ran the risk of firing the bullet through Austin into John, killing John. And so Dan tells Kristen, "Hold on, I'm going to tase him." And so he moves around Kristen to her left.
Why is that not your first response? If you cannot take the fucking shot and you clearly see he's wrapped around a man that's asking for help, why in the fuck is the taser not the first thing you grab? Because one thing I would do is risk shooting them both in the leg. Shoot the man on top of him in the ass. Like, get him off of him. But I strongly feel like he finna say that he is eating this man's face. I feel like that.
Left side, so he's positioned looking down at the back of Austin. He pulls out his taser, and right before he shoots his taser into Austin's back, he sees what Austin is doing to John's face.
I know it.
Did you know that you...
I know it. He finna say that this man is chewing on the side of this man's face.
With his free right hand, he was reaching into John's mouth and pulling his cheek out, kind of like a fish hook. He was pulling it out as far as he could, and then he was biting into John's cheek, and he was ripping out pieces of flesh and chewing and swallowing them. And from his position, Dan only saw this for a second, but he suddenly noticed, and Kristen, the other officer, would later confirm, there were all these chunks.
We have all bitten our inner jaw before. All of us. There's not a single person in the world that has never bitten their jaw. Even biting down here. And when you bite, your immediate reaction is to let go because it hurts, right? Imagine somebody else biting that don't know the pain that you feel. So they just fucking biting.
Already missing from John's face. And so Dan kind of snapped out of what he was seeing and fired his taser into the back of Austin, but it did nothing. It had absolutely no effect. Austin was entirely focused on biting John's face. That was all he was doing. He wasn't even registering that there were cops with their guns drawn on.
Now I hate to go there, but I'm gonna go there. Had he not had the complexion for the protection, they'd have shot him and Dan. Him and John. They'd have just took both of them out.
Him. It was like they weren't even there. And so Dan runs back around Kristen to the other side of her. He's now on her right side, so he's standing right next to the car, looking down at Austin's front. And he tells Kristen to kind of back up for a second, and then Dan winds up and kicks Austin square in the face, knocking his head off of John's face. But as soon as Austin comes off of John, he doesn't get up and try to fight with Dan. Instead, he just jumps back down, gets a deeper grip on John, and plunges his mouth back onto John's face. face. And so again, Dan winds up and boots Austin square in the face, knocking his head back. But again, he's totally unfazed. He doesn't want to attack the officers. He just wants to eat John's face. And so he goes right back down, gets a tighter grip. He goes back and he starts chewing on John's face again. And so Dan was just repeatedly kicking him in the face over and over and over again, right as another set of...
If I was John, shoot this nigga. Shoot this nigga, man. If you hit me, fine. Shoot him. Shoot him. Shoot him.
Officers showed up and they had a canine, they had a dog. And so they come flying up, they kind of see the situation, and Dan tells them, release the dog. And so sure enough, they release the canine. The canine clamps down on Austin's right arm, the arm that was fish hooking and kind of pulling John's face out. And the dog really got a good bite on his arm and yanked it away from John's face. But Austin just instantly ripped his arm back, doing severe damage to his arm from the dog's teeth, and just repositioned himself and went back to biting John's face. And so
Nothing said when the canine ripped his arm and he lifted up. Shoot him. Kill him. Neutralize him. Extinct him. Get rid of him. Blow him away. Nothing said when the dog got him the least bit lifted to massacre this nigga. Nothing said that.
the dog, just as it was trained, did another bite. It grabbed back onto Austin's arm and it pulled it off of John's body, and so his arm is back like this again.
Shoot him!
Austin, again, unfazed, just yanked his arm out of the dog's teeth, again, shredding the muscles of his arm, and gets back in position and continues to eat John's face. And then finally, the dog gets another bite into Austin.
Imagine being John. Y'all remember the reenactment I did of the car accident? How long that shit take? Imagine having somebody gnawing on your motherfucking face. Not only gnawing on your face, but holding you. Then did whatever the fuck they gonna do to your wife. This is an older man. This boy is gnawing on your face, and you can see help. You can talk to... Could you imagine how long all of this took? They had to wait on backup. Kristen had to wait on Dan. Dan gets there. Dan is repeatedly kicking this man as he is latched on to me. And I know that there are two motherfuckers with guns standing here. Tase him in the face. Continue to pump motherfucking volts into him, if not bullets. I'm cool. Because I would rather have y'all accidentally shoot me than to be eaten to fucking death. Eaten alive at that. Bless his heart. Oh my God.
Austin's arm, and this time when the dog managed to yank Austin's arm away from John, Dan timed it so he booted Austin square in the face right as his arm was being pulled back, and he hit him hard enough that Austin actually flew off of John and landed.
Turn that nigga into a pincushion.
On his back. And as soon as he was on the ground, Dan leapt over John and landed on Austin's face, smashing his head into the cement, which kind of stunned him for a second. And as soon as he was stunned, Dan whipped out his handcuffs, threw it over one of Austin's wrists.
Y'all can tell me I was wrong for what I said earlier, but had he not had the complexion for the protection, all of this wouldn't have happened. What the fuck you mean when they finally got him loose from eating a human being and you guys are witnessing this? Nothing said shoot him. Because he's not a threat to anybody out here except this nigga. This man thinks he's a fucking cheater and you're not gonna shoot him? I want y'all to blow everything in him out.
And began pulling him by the handcuff up the driveway away from John. But as soon as he had some separation and Dan went to put the other handcuff on Austin, Austin began fighting back, and he looked up at Dan and he screamed, "Kill me! I'm eating humans! Kill me!" Dan didn't even know what to do, and so he's trying to put the other handcuff on him the whole time. Austin is screaming, "Kill me! Kill me!" And so other officers had to run in, and then finally, after 3 other officers came over, they were able to hold Austin down long enough enough to get both handcuffs on him. After Austin was finally restrained, the officers checked on the victims. They checked on Michelle, who was in the garage, and unfortunately she was deceased. She had died from blunt force trauma. And John, even though he had been alive when the police first showed up, he had succumbed to the multitude of injuries he had sustained, from stabbings to beatings to having a portion of his face ripped off. It's believed after John came back from his walk, which would have been right after Jeff had been attacked and ran back to his house, John saw Austin in his garage attacking his wife, and John ran in to try to save her. So ultimately, John would die trying to save the woman that he loved. Their dog would survive the attack. It was unharmed, and it was given to one of their children to take care of. And Jeff Fisher, the neighbor who tried to save John and Michelle, he would survive the attack and make a full recovery. After Austin was finally handcuffed and was laying restrained on the driveway, he suddenly became unresponsive. He was rushed to the hospital, where it was determined he had drank some poisonous chemicals, most likely from inside of John and Michelle's garage, and that was what was causing his organs to fail. Ultimately, Austin would go into a coma for 11 days from whatever he ingested, but the doctors were able to save his life, and so he...
Save his life for what? Am I missing something? Saved his life. Nothing told you to move quicker to save the life of them other people, but y'all saved his life? The fuck?
He would come out of that coma and he would make a full physical recovery. It was initially assumed that because of Austin's drug abuse history, that he must have been on some drug when he perpetrated this heinous crime. It was speculated that he could have been on bath salts or flakka, which are these synthetic hallucinogenic drugs, which are very powerful, and at the time they were quite popular in Florida, and they'd caused some other users to go on these kind of wild, violent rampages. And so it seemed to make a lot of sense that he must have been on one of those. But when Austin's toxicology report finally came back, it showed he only had a very small amount of THC in his system, which is the drug found in marijuana.
I refuse to believe that. Y'all can attempt to cover it up and make it look good because it's a little white boy from the suburbs. Weed ain't never made me hungry for a motherfucking human. Now, I may go up in there and eat that refrigerator fucking handle, but I'm not finna go chew on Mike. We don't do that. And I hate that this is the picture that they trying to paint. That ain't what the fuck he was on. And I feel like his goddamn family should slightly be held responsible too. Because y'all could have did a better goddamn job. When he told y'all he was on some shit, I'm not going to allow him to patrol the fucking house because he thinks he's a lion. You're not going to patrol my house and then be knocking at my door. And the only way I can protect myself in my home is to lock myself in my room. This shouldn't even got this far. Anybody that he told something to that something was wrong with him should be implicated in this shit. It took for 2 people to die, and it took for 1 person to be severely injured for your fucking son to live.
And then the other drugs that were in his system were all induced by the doctors and nurses at the hospital, which...
So, y'all didn't test him until he got to the hospital. So whatever would have been in his motherfucking system would have either mixed up with the other shit or been flushed out because y'all put different shit in. Stop playing with people. All that THC bullshit. So it ain't no other drug that was in his system that y'all could see. Because everything else was put in there. Since y'all done took so much time with him, why y'all didn't stick his ass and get a blood sample right then where he was at? Because whatever the fuck he done took, they got him chewing on niggas. And Ginsu knifing motherfuckers. Growling and shit. Like, nothing in your mind said that, hey, we need to see right away what this is. No, let's get him to the hospital. Let's get him some help. Let's make sure he okay. Because he's not the fucking problem.
which meant at the time of this attack, Austin was effectively sober. When the police asked Austin, "Why did you do this?" he initially said, "I don't remember, I don't know." But eventually he would open up and he would tell this story that no sane person could possibly understand.
Look at him. Compared to the beginning pictures. He's thin as fucking wind. His eyes are sunk in. He don't even look like the same motherfucking person. When he was laying up, they supposed to shot him through the neck. There's somewhere y'all could have shot him where y'all wouldn't have severely hurt that man. But look at him. Full fucking recovery. That's just like a drunk fucking driver that lived.
He said after he left that restaurant where his family was that third time, after he fought with his father and he stormed out, after that, he saw this dark figure outside with a white face. And he knew immediately that this figure was evil. And so instinctively, Austin began running away from this evil figure. And so he ran about 4 miles into John and Michelle's neighborhood. And when he got to this neighborhood, a neighborhood he was not familiar with, that he didn't intend to go to on purpose, he just kind of wound up there. He said he saw this brightly lit up garage and he ran up into it, believing he could enlist the help of the people inside of this house and that they would help him defeat this evil figure that was lurking somewhere nearby. And so he runs up into this garage, which happens to be John.
Y'all want somebody to believe THC doing that? THC did that? Marijuana did that to him? Ain't no wacky tobacco or peyotes done did this to this man. The devil cigarettes. I don't like this. I don't like this. All this protection provided for this little boy.
John and Michelle's garage, and Michelle is in there. John is not. He's out for the walk with his dog, and Austin approaches her.
So he can recall the events. He can tell y'all that he owned drugs. Nobody helped. He can ask what year was he fucking born. Leaves in and out of a goddamn restaurant. Y'all see him drinking vegetable fucking oil and eating Parmesan goddamn cheese off the counter in the fucking house. He's patrolling your house like an animal. You have to lock your own door in your house. When in the fuck did the warning sign pop up that maybe we need to put this motherfucker away? Nothing said after all 7 of them warnings, and I believe I'm missing a couple. Nothing said we need to do something about this immediately. Oh, when he mushed his daddy in front of every motherfucking body. Excuse me. When he moved his bed into the garage. I'm at 9. I got one more. When he moved his bed into the fucking garage. Like nothing is telling y'all, let's get him off the motherfucking street because he may be a danger. No, he has to be dangerous first.
And tries to get her to help him, but he probably came off looking completely insane, and Michelle screamed. At which point, Austin said he believed Michelle was a witch, and so he pulled out his knife and he attacked her. And then after
where did he get a knife from? He just has a knife on his person? Or did he get the knife from the restaurant that he left out of? Or perhaps he got the knife from his house that he managed to make it to. Go in, do all kind of shit, change clothes. Nobody ever...
She fell to the ground. Austin said he drank a bottle of alcohol or something, which we now know was most likely very poisonous lawn chemicals that was just in the garage. After he drinks that bottle, he turns around and now he's looking out of the garage towards the street. And he said he saw this other figure in the doorway with a dog next to him. And then Austin said his mind just went blank. It's believed the figure he saw in the doorway was John Stevens returning from his walk, but we don't know for sure, and frankly, this story is pretty incoherent to begin with, because it doesn't account for the fact that before John came back, Austin had been grappling with Jeff Fisher and stabbing Jeff Fisher, the neighbor. But
right.
Austin would say he has no recollection of encountering Jeff Fisher, he has no recollection of John or what he looked like, and he certainly doesn't remember biting John's face, and he had no memory of any interactions with police. He said that basically he turned around, he sees this figure, this dog, and then his mind went blank, and then he woke up about 2 weeks later in the hospital. Now, when his story went public, a lot of people just were not willing to accept that story. They said he was making it up so he could plead insanity at his trial and get a lesser sentence. But
he had already got enough grace. It wouldn't even matter if he pleaded insanity. They gonna still give him what they gonna... He's already got enough grace.
Forensic psychologist named Philip Resnick, who had worked on many high-profile cases before, he did a assessment of Austin, and he came to a very different conclusion than the public. In his 38-page report, Resnick points out the fact that Austin continued to bite John's face even when he was being openly threatened with being shot by the police officer standing right over him. He continued to bite John's face after he was tased. He continued to bite John's face after he was kicked in the head repeatedly. He continued to bite John's face after a dog repeatedly.
I had a family member that attempted to rob a store and was kicked 7 times and got up in the face, bludgeoned and hit with shit. The motherfucker was on methamphetamine. Okay? That's the only way. Weed ain't doing this. Weed ain't doing this.
Bit him. This all suggests that Austin was truly in a psychotic state when this attack occurred. A sane person, even under the influence of drugs, will retain a basic survival instinct. They will try to protect themselves. So when there are guns pointed at them, or they're being physically harmed, or there's threats of violence, they'll do things to protect themselves. But Austin didn't. It was like he had no idea about anything else except John's face. Resnick specified that the type of psychotic episode that Austin was suffering from on the night of the attack is something called clinical lycanthropy delusions. Clinical lycanthropy is a very rare occurrence where an individual believes they are no longer human. And almost always what they believe they are is something akin to a werewolf. And in Austin's case, it's not that hard to figure out why you might reach that type of conclusion. He had told his sister that he believed he was half horse, and then on a couple other occasions, he had told his other friends that he believed he was half dog. And then, of course, on the night...
He told y'all all of this. Like, what else would have had to been said? I believe he was actually fucked up from all the drugs he had taken, so that caused his psychosis. But there's nothing to be done with the family, because if Mr. Ballin got all this information, somebody else do too.
Of the attack, after he killed Michelle, he pounced literally on John and began eating his face while making those loud animalistic grunting sounds. This is behavior that is certainly on par with what you would expect a werewolf to do in a movie. But this was not a movie, this was real life. After Austin came out of his coma, but before he had been transferred to jail, he agreed to do an interview with the clinical psychologist, TV personality Phil McGraw, better known as Dr. Phil. And during their 10-minute Zoom interview, Austin would break down and cry and say he was incredibly sorry to the family of the victims, that he didn't really know why it happened, and that clearly there was something wrong with him and he needed help. And he just hoped they could find it in their hearts to eventually forgive him. But it's unlikely the family of the victims are going to forgive him anytime soon.
Ever.
Especially when you consider they came out in an interview and said, I hope Austin makes a full recovery from his coma, that he has no brain damage, that he is totally A-okay, so he can be fully aware and lucid when they read him his sentence. A sentence they hoped would be the death penalty.
Absolutely
As of right now, though, the family of the victims will just have to keep on waiting because Austin is still in jail awaiting trial.
Absolutely.
So that's going to do it, guys. If you got some...
Yeah. This done played with my spirit, child. I thought I was going to do another one, but I'm not. This done it for me. This did it. Fuck that. I love y'all. Till next time. Bye.